All right. Say your first name.
My full legal name, or
just your first name.
Cam.
And you are in town visiting.
Yes, ma'am.
And what are you doing here?
I'm just coming to see the beach and the city. I hear there's like this, it's like called Starship. This company, SpaceX, they're building this big rocket. No.
Yeah.
So I'm here to visit the SpaceX's Starbase facility. I'm originally a NASA scientist from Huntsville, but I also help do rocket launch boat tours down to Cape Canaveral. I'm also involved in the SpaceX Reddit, and we actually planned this trip for a while with some of my friends from that. We came down and to see the Starbase facility, since we hadn't seen it for quite a while. Actually, the last time I've been here because of COVID and everything was the 2019 presentation.
Okay.
And so oh yeah.
Okay.
We actually had to ask a question about Super Heavy, about the landing profile, and then it was me, Martin, Declan from Flight Club, and Robin from Supercluster, and Chris G from NSF, all in the hotel afterward, trying to figure out exactly what it was going to look like on Flight Club. And Elon walks by, and we see him, so that was pretty cool. So it brings back a lot of good memories. Fortunately, they're not all here, but I got some more friends from some other communities here. And met a lot of other cool people, just like you. So.
Awesome. Yeah, it's been such a pleasure to meet you.
And I'm sure all you folks in chat too. Very nice to talk with you as well.
They said Boca Chica, come for the beach, stay for the rockets.
Yes, yep. That is right.
A little Cam action for Cam.
Yes, Cam.
And let's see. Once again, where were you born and raised?
I was originally from Alexandria, Virginia, which is right near basically Washington, D.C.
Okay.
D.C. area. I grew up there my whole life. Went to T.C. Williams High School. Remember the Titans, all that?
Oh,
yeah.
I love that movie.
Yep.
I went to summer camp with she was the little girl, Hayden Panettiere. Right?
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember the Titans. Who doesn't remember?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Great movie, although a lot of it is a little fictionalized, but I love the musical score, and of course our football team isn't good anymore, but our rowing team, they all send people to the Olympics every year, every Olympics, and they were at this big international tournament up in Canada, and they were like, oh, do you watch that movie before school every day? And yeah, so and then I went to Blacksburg, Virginia for Southwest Virginia, which is sort of not too far from DC for anyone not from the U.S. It's a big, went to Virginia Tech, got my degrees in meteorology and geography, minors in math and physics, because I've always been interested in space and the weather. I did space weather for a while, then I did more atmospheric science, and now I'm down in the UAH, University of Alabama Huntsville, in getting my PhD, as well as working for NASA as a researcher, working on satellites, using machine learning to detect storms from satellites. And they're just launching another one of our satellites, GOES-T, in just about a month, hopefully, if it goes off. And
his or friends are going to just totally geek.
Yeah, I mean, it's
like the GOES,
Yeah, I mean, and so if you guys have ever seen a satellite image on TV, like the weather person showing the satellite image, that's probably from the GOES satellites. And not only do we have that imager, but we also have a new thing called the Geostationary lightning mapper. That can actually, basically like a really high-speed camera, 500 frames a second, it can see lightning across the whole Western Hemisphere. And not only can it detect, we got a thunderstorm, but especially in areas without radar coverage, if you guys live in a country that doesn't have good radar, well, it can actually, with the patterns that we see in the lightning, can actually help us detect tornadoes and other severe weather. So that's what I'm building. I'm building an AI, building a machine learning system to process the data from the satellite in order to be able to determine things like that. Because the hardware is working well, the camera's working well, but the software is not quite up to standard. So we've made a lot of improvements, but I'm building a new system to do that, and also to unlock a lot of other ways of doing research with lightning. Because we can actually detect, for example, if we see a really long lightning flash that lasts a lot of frames, well, that's called continuing current, and that can cause wildfires. And there's an association of that with wildfires. So that's another really awesome application of the satellites. So there's a lot of things that people say, oh, why do we send up all these rockets when we got problems here on Earth? Well, not only does of every dollar spent on space exploration, we get $10 of benefit on Earth, but satellites are critical for things we do every day, the things we take for granted these days that they didn't have back then, detecting hurricanes, tornadoes, and wildfires, forest fires, tsunamis, all sorts of events all across the world. I mean, most of the data, 99% of the data we get in our climate models now that allow us to predict what the weather is. Sure, it's not perfect, but it's not bad. A lot of that comes from satellite, and they actually tested, with Hurricane Sandy, if they could predict that, when it turned and hit New York, well, the track would be way off if it wasn't for the satellite data that our satellites provide from NASA and from NOAA. So a lot of cool things you can do with satellites beyond just going up into space. We also look back at Earth. We actually have an instrument. If you guys, I'm sure you all love SpaceX. Well, so not only am I using data from the GO satellite, but which orbit the Earth at a geostationary altitude, but also we're using data from the.
Sorry, Janet just pointed out your collar's down.
Oh, thanks. Sorry about that. I'm a bit of a disjointed scientist.
No, you're good.
I appreciate it. And so also the SpaceX Dragon actually launched, so we actually had a leftover sensor from one of our old satellites. Well, we put that on the SpaceX Dragon, and they launched that on CRS-10 to the space station. That's on the space station right now. And we're using that to kind of cross-compare with the data from our geostationary satellites, because they can see some things and the space station can see other things. That's part of what my research is doing, is cross-comparing that so we can get better data from both. So a lot of cool things going on with that.
It's like a lot.
Yeah.
Wow. You got a lot of passion.
I guess so. I mean, you have a lot of energy too, so I don't know how you can do it all day, but...
I mean, you just do it, right?
Yes, ma'am.
That is so cool. Wow. Does anybody in the chat have questions for Cam?
Ask me anything.
Yeah, any questions for him? First of all, well, here's another weather. There's 3 storm chasers in the vicinity of this.
I know.
This is crazy.
Got another one right over there.
Yeah. We're convening.
It's very convenient. All right, bye. That's it. No more.
I love it. You're right. Okay,
Cam Wright.
If people want to follow you on somewhere, anywhere on social media, how are you on it? Are you allowed to
so I got a few different things. I don't have a lot of personal accounts I maintain, but I got my so there's 2 main things that I do. So first of all, if you ever heard of the SpaceX subreddit on Reddit r/SpaceX, I'm one of the moderators on there. I help maintain that, as well as several of the other SpaceX related Reddits like SpaceX Lounge. Help build a lot of the bots to help maintain that and give updated information. So you can always follow us in there. We'll also be covering the hopefully fingers crossed we'll be covering the live event on Thursday at 8 p.m. And then second of all, so we got that, and then we also run these boat tours of the right now of Cape Canaveral, but hopefully perhaps someday down here too. So we got our website star-fleet.tours. That's our website. We also got our Twitter. Tours. It's called Starfleet Tours. And of course, when Buddy Steven was here, we have a cool sticker and all our flag and all our cool stuff. But our whole goal is we're not making money off this. It's just a side thing because we love space. Our goal is to get you out there and be able to see the rocket on the pad, and then go out there and watch it launch and watch it land. We can get a really unique visual, especially of the boosters landing. We can get as close as you can legally get, and they come in right over the boat. It's an amazing experience out in the water. And of course, beyond that, we try to help other people who, no matter where you want to view launches, we're there to help, because that's what we're about. We're about giving people great experiences, and no matter how you watch launches. And maybe someday we'll come down here too and help people out here.
I hope
so.
Wow.
Those are our main channels right there.
A lot of things.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
A lot of things. So I'm going to just ask, way back when did you first become interested in weather and
space?
Geology or space or
meteorology? I mean, it was just, when I was like 2 or 3, I was always into space, always into, as long as I can remember, as long as my mom remembers. Like when I was 2 or 3, don't laugh, guys. I had my sky friends. I had Mr. Dark Clouds and Mr. Tornado, and I would talk to them. And but I was terrified of the weather. When I was little, I was scared of everything, but I was especially scared of the weather. I was just afraid at any moment it might drop a tornado or a windstorm or a hurricane or something. I was really afraid, and that's what pushed me to learn more about weather, so I can understand more. Because weather, it wasn't really the weather I was afraid of, but it was the uncertainty. It was not knowing. The atmosphere is such a chaotic place. You don't know what's going to happen next, and a lot of our fears all go back to uncertainty. And so that pushed me to understand more. And the more I learned, the more I became fascinated by it, and the more I wanted to help others. To be able to push back, because everyone's afraid. What if there's a whole flood? What if there's a a hurricane, especially when there's a big event coming, everyone's afraid. No one knows, what's going on. Well, that's kind of what drives me to do what I do, is not just to make cool discoveries about the weather, because we have a whole laboratory above our heads, but also help bring that back to people here, and to help push back the boundaries of uncertainty and help people feel more safe and more secure, and able to make better use of every moment we have here on Earth. So when I was little, and then I was like, when I was 5, I was like, oh, I want to get a PhD in this and a bachelor's in this and a master's in that, and I love space and I want to be an astronaut. I read Sally Ride's book, To Space and Back. That was my favorite book. That was really inspirational, but I figured it was very unlikely, so I better be a scientist instead. And hey, if I ever get to be an astronaut, if I ever get lucky, then yeah. But it's the scientists. It's for every astronaut you see, which are really important people, we have thousands of scientists who help build the tools and build the software and build the research that helps get them there. So a lot of moving parts in the whole chain, and they're all very important too. So
we have a lot of questions coming in.
All right, fire away. I'll try to keep it shorter. I can ramble. I can ramble. Camble on a little bit. So fire away.
I love it. All right, we're loving this energy. Everybody give some love that came in the chat. Okay, we're going to start with a question from Alyssa Pipe.
All right.
And she says, how do you train your ML models?
Well, that's a good question. So I'm getting a little geeky here, but let's do it. So in the past I've used some very, very simple methods, like of course you all start with good old GLM, and then you go to, which is not GLM I use, a generalized linear model, which is very simple. Then we use the most common technique is what's called random forest for very simple machine learning models. It's basically, you can think of like a decision tree, right? Like it's like, am I hungry? It's like, say we have a question, should I have lunch? Well, it's like, am I hungry? Yes. Am I near a restaurant? Yes. Okay, well I should go to the restaurant. It's like we basically build this big tree of decision trees. We put them all together, and that's basically a random forest. For those, now I'm sure Alyssa already knows what I'm talking about, and then for more complex machine learning models like we're working on now, we're using what's called convolutional neural nets. So like the human eye, when you look at a face, right? You don't look at every little grain of sand on the face, every little pixel, right? You look, okay, that's eyes, no, that's a mouse. Oh, look, that's a person. I know who that is. And so you build up from those small features to those big features. And if you look at a new face, you don't have to look at every little thing again. You just look at the overall arrangement of things. And so we're trying to apply those same techniques to looking at clouds and lightning with our satellites. And there's also other techniques that we can use as well that we're also exploring. But those are the two main ones that we use right now.
Okay. I have a question from Stephanie Ball. Mm-hmm. She asks, what is the geostationary orbit height of that satellite, the GOES satellite? Right, so geostationary orbit is actually the same height for every satellite. Okay. It's about 36,000 kilometers, or about, I believe, 25,000 miles above Earth. And at that altitude, the satellite orbits at the same speed that the Earth does. So the satellite appears to be stationary in the sky right over you. And that's why if you say you have a DirecTV or Dish, you have a satellite internet or TV provider, usually that's going to be geostationary, because you just put your dish up and it points at one spot, because the satellite, it's all those satellites, and those are very competitive, those slots, because it's very specific altitude and one very specific, because they're right over the equator. Otherwise they go north and south and north and south. You have to move the dish around. Now those satellites are good, but you can only get so many of them up there, and that's why it's very competitive. That's why you can only get your internet speed is very slow, and it takes a long time to get there and back. That's why SpaceX is building what's called Starlink, which of course is what Jessica is using. And that actually has a phased array dish that electronically can track those satellites moving fast over the sky. Those orbit around, I believe, around 500-600 kilometers, and that makes them much closer, much faster. And those potentially be good too. That's like what the space station does, like our other instrument, our other lightning instrument. And that instrument, it can only see a smaller region of Earth, and it rotates around Earth a lot, but it also has higher resolution. It doesn't have a lot of the errors that can happen at very high altitudes, where you get a lot of issues where you get close to the edge of the Earth. So we can use both those instruments together to build a more accurate lightning product, to say where's the lightning and how can we use this information. So that's why we're doing that. It kind of works into some other things too. Thanks, Stephanie. I love it. This is so great. There's people are loving you so much. Let's see here. I love questions. I love to be here. So questions coming, everybody. Let me see. Dave Avery had one. Oh, Dave Avery asked, what do you think of the update, or how much has been updated since the last presentation?
Well, there's certainly a lot. There's certainly. I mean, it's not going to be a huge like, oh, we're going to change the whole. We're going to change from stainless steel to aluminum or something very large. Obviously, we can see right here, it's not going to change too much. I think it's a lot of little incremental things, a lot of refinement, kind of closing on exactly on more specifically what the final architecture is going to be. I mean, a lot of things that thanks to folks like Jessica, we actually can see with our own eyes, and we can kind of see because we're able to be so involved in looking at what's going on with everyone. A lot of the updates are things that we already probably kind of know because SpaceX has been very transparent, and of course we've had very dedicated people like Jessica and NSF out there capturing this. But I think a lot of the big updates that I'm touch the mic, looking forward to is going to be what's going to happen with Ship 24 and Booster 7, and what's the timeline for the orbital flight, and particularly a lot of the is what's going on with Raptor 2. So Raptor 2 is the next generation of Raptor. Not only is it going to be much higher thrust, but it's also potentially going to be a lot more efficient, more reliable, and much cheaper and easier to produce. Apparently SpaceX was having some problems, according to Elon's memo, was having some problems with getting Raptor 2 production up to the levels that they wanted. They wanted to be really rapid and cheap and mass manufacturable, and that's what they're working on right now. And so we're definitely looking forward to seeing some updates on that situation and kind of on what their more specific plans are going forward for the timeline. So probably not one big huge groundbreaking thing, but lots of little things, especially for folks who don't look at every little thing and try to analyze every little detail. So it's certainly something we're all looking forward to. It's been 2.5 years, which is usually they have them every year because of COVID is delayed. So definitely looking forward to this one.
Awesome. I have a question from Brent Becker. He says, what are your thoughts on Raspberry Pi Cube satellite?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I actually work with Raspberry Pis, but except just not on CubeSats yet anyway. We actually have a network of, so we have our lightning sensors that we're using. We have a few dozen lightning sensors that we're deploying. We can deploy it. I built this whole system to allow you to deploy them anywhere in the world with a cell connection, potentially in the future even Starlink. We can deploy them anywhere and send back live lightning data. And it uses a Raspberry Pi to control everything and send back the data and send commands through. And it's a really great tool, especially a smaller one like a Raspberry Pi Zero for a satellite. Now, we also have what's called a series of stick nets, basically just like regular tripods with a bunch of very low-cost weather sensors that cost less than $100, which is really cheap, and we can deploy thousands of them in remote areas, in dense networks and widespread networks, especially in countries that maybe not have the resources for very expensive fancy weather stations. They still do a really good job. Having a lot of them helps us both get data from the ground and compare that with the satellite. And we use Raspberry Pis for that, Pi Zeros, because they're really cheap and you can do a lot of cool things with them. Now, I don't personally work on them for satellites, at least not right now, but I have some colleagues who do, who are working on a lot of CubeSat-based efforts, and it certainly seems very promising. Obviously, the radiation hardening in the space rating is going to be a problem, because there's a lot of things you got to think about with space, and not just with this satellite going to work, but also is it going to cause problems for the other satellites in the same launch? Is it going to have outgassing? Is it going to cause space debris? There's a lot of things to worry about. So I can't speak with expertise on this, but it certainly seems like a very promising thing in the future, especially if there's a Raspberry Pi that's optimized for those kind of applications.
Super cool. I had the opportunity to meet the guy who created Raspberry Pi.
Oh, really? The British guy?
Yeah, the British
awesome.
guy. I photographed it was a middle school science fair, equivalent to ISEP, Intel ISEP.
Yeah. I went to that. Yeah.
Broadcom Masters.
Oh yeah. Yes.
DC.
Yeah. I've been to those. Yeah. Basically, ISEP is like the kind of the big science fair. Then Broadcom Masters is just the seniors. I try. It's like very selective. I try to get into that. I didn't make the cut. I got into ISEP, but not the Broadcom Masters. But those are the creme de la creme.
Yeah, I worked at a company that produced the events.
Oh, really?
Until ISEP.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
Anyways, we've got a few more questions for you. Let's see.
6K.
Let's see. One second. Okay, my name is Ass. Hi. What algorithm allows a rocket to control its thrust vector? Is it machine learning too? Is it learning on the fly, or is it pre-trained?
So that's actually so first of all, to say I'm not a rocket scientist. I just play one on the internet. But but I do have some knowledge of that. They actually, very recently, they had an Ask Me Anything with the SpaceX software team on our SpaceX, and they gave some amazing answers. That's probably one of the best AMAs I've ever seen. If you look it up, they actually have several of them now, and they give all this detail, which is amazing, about about what they do, what the language they use. Obviously, they can't get super specific because a lot of it's classified, but it's very interesting to hear what they do. And from that and from other sources, they don't really use machine learning for that because there's a risk that if the model makes it encounters a situation it hasn't seen before, there's a little glitch and there's always gonna be little glitches in machine learning, especially unless you train it on lots and lots and lots of flights, which we don't yet. At least maybe in the future. But right now, the risk is that it can make a mistake and boom, crash into something, and that would be bad. So it's basically using the core physics equations, the core equations of physics and mechanics, to basically it runs it over and over and over iteratively, many times a second, and it recalculates. Okay, here's it knows where the rocket's pointing, and it knows where it is. It knows where it is because it knows where it isn't. Not quite, but basically it knows where the rocket's pointing. It knows knows gravity, and it calculates the various forces involved, and then it calculates, okay, if the rocket's at this angle, it's just simple trigonometry, then this is how it's going to. That's what's going to happen. And it basically takes lots of derivatives and determines, okay, here's what's moving, here's acceleration, and it's basically a lot of simple but also more complex equations. So I can't speak to the specifics, but it's kind of more traditional methodology. Maybe in the future, once we get more rockets. Oh, sorry about that.
No, don't be sorry.
I tend to ramble on too much.
They're loving you. Okay, we've got a question from. A lot of people are doing a comparison to Reed Timmer. How do you feel about Reed Timmer?
Oh, Reed Timmer. Oh, I got plenty of stories about that. Yeah, Reed Timmer. Yeah, so back up. It's on the ground. It's big. It's violent. It's on the ground. Oh my gosh, Joel. Yeah, he is. So yeah, I mean, but funny enough, when I was younger, when I was little, I loved weather. I loved all that stuff. Big fan of Storm Chasers. I watched all the shows. I was a huge fan of everything, and I was like, "Oh, Reed, yo!" And then when I got older, I was like, "I don't know." Some of this stuff was a little bit reckless, not quite. I can't endorse all of that. I definitely was a fan of the research guys like Josh Worman and Tim Samaras. May rest in peace. We actually have his truck, not the one he was in, obviously, but his other truck at our. We use it now for our research, so carrying on his work, which I always get a little emotional whenever I pass it, going to my lab. But he was a good guy. Everyone really respected him. But in any case, yeah, Reed, he's much safer than Reed. But fortunately, Reed's still around, still kicking. And yeah, he's very, obviously I kind of got a lot of my passion going watching that show when I was in middle school, and particularly I like Josh Worman with the big radar truck, and now we have our own radar truck here. And I actually got to meet him when I was in when I was in 8th, 9th grade. Oh, cool. I got to meet him. I was it was literally meeting the biggest celebrity you can imagine. It was like meeting Elon or meeting some huge celebrity. I got overwhelmed. I couldn't handle it for a while. It took me a while to even approach the truck and say hello to him, and it was just he was a rock star and to me, and Reed as well. Reed, I mean, and of course there was one time though I was at this science fair awards banquet. I think I was in 7th or 8th grade, and it was the AIAAA American Institute of Astronautics and Aeronautics for my project on space weather. But the head of the president of the American Meteorological Society was there, John Millay, and he had this tie. And it was had all the weather symbols on it, and I was like, "Oh, that's so cool! I gotta get that tie." My dad was like, "Oh, he's a big fan of Reed Timmer," and I was like, "Don't say that, Dad! You ruined my future career. They're not gonna like me anymore." But then I saw John Millay the next year at our local chapter of the EMS, and I was like, I'd gotten that tie. I still have that tie. It's my favorite tie. I was like, "I got your tie," and I was like, "Yeah." Awesome. So yeah, that's my feelings about that. Yeah, I love his energy, but can't necessarily endorse everything he does, but I love his energy.
Understood. Brent Becker asks, which programming language are you using for the ML lightning detection? Python, Rust, .NET, Node.js?
Oh, I'm going to start some flame wars in the comments over this one. I guess, I mean, the most common one and the one I use mostly, I use a little bit of R, a little bit of C++. I've done a little Java in the past, didn't like it. I obviously do JavaScript for some of the web-based stuff. like some of the web dashboards I build for my sensors that you can see the real-time data. But the main language I use, definitely for sure, is Python. I actually work. I started out just like I actually only learned it a few years back for a kind of a side job I was doing for a company. I built them a whole machine learning system in Python, and it took a little bit to get used to because didn't have all the stuff built in. You had to use NumPy and SciPy and Pandas, but yeah, I mean, Python's a really great language, pretty easy to learn if you're a beginner. And now I've actually just very recently, I actually was contributing to a bunch of open source projects like Spider and several other software packages that help people learn Python and also apply it to scientific applications. Spider is a great tool, by the way. Definitely recommend it. And now I'm actually involved in kind of the core Python development itself. I help write and edit basically the specifications for Python itself. I work with Guido van Rossum, the creator of Python. He actually invited me to join their core team, and I work with that. Now I work on the Python documentation as well, because it's great to have a programming language that does lots of cool things, but it's even more important to explain it to people and say, okay, here's how it does, here's how I can use it. So documentation, I've always done a lot of writing, copy editing, technical writing. So that's kind of been a real passion for me, and that's what I'm just joined one of the teams that do that for the core Python itself, as well as working with Guido on the kind of the proposals for the next generation of Python. So that's really cool to be able to give back to the language that's done that's opened so many doors for millions of people across the world with all the open source software. So Python's a great language. A lot of other great languages too. I love Julia, really cool language. I haven't got the time to learn it as much. Rust is really cool, and I haven't much experience with .NET, but of course JavaScript and Node. I have used that for web-based stuff. So a lot of cool languages out there. Definitely a lot of great tools in the toolbox, but Python's my number one personally. So
that's your personal fave.
Yep.
Python.
Yes, ma'am.
Heard it straight from his mouth.
Straight from the cam's mouth.
Let's see, SD. I love you're so good with
Can't stop, won't stop.
You got it. Yes, I say that all
Cam
the time.
right.
Cam right. Adrian Kim is coming in with Python TV.
He's camming in with.
Okay.
All right, that's enough.
No, keep it coming. SB Shepard says, Cam, what's your take on traceability of AI-aided research when we humans, which is something we want to understand what the solution found by AI actually means?
That is a really, really, really good question. So obviously I'm not an AI researcher. I'm more I use it in my research, but that's something I have read a lot of interesting work on, particularly when it comes to things like Teslas. There's something that people are doing now called adversarial training, where basically if you find just the right pattern, you can actually trick the model into thinking that say a road is a turn and then screech, and that can have, as we're applying AI more and more to production applications, that can have very serious safety implications. So we definitely want to understand what the model is doing and why. And of course in meteorology and science, that's particularly important, because in science we don't like black boxes. We don't just like putting numbers and getting results. We want to understand why the system is working the way it is, because in science, at least, unlike maybe with humans, with us humans, as my cat would say, the system is governed by basic physical laws, and science isn't just about punching in numbers and getting answers like a calculator, but we want to understand the whys and the hows, and to be able to understand more deeply why things are happening, so we can draw additional insights into other things and apply this knowledge elsewhere, and know that we have a model that's not just giving numbers for the situations that we fed it, but also other situations as well. I mean, that's where you see a lot of instances where models will reproduce things that are some of the worst parts of human characters, because it's training on the data that it has that may not be representative of everyone's experiences. So in terms of more specifically, some of the things that we're doing is looking at is some of the techniques we use for that. Of course, some of the models have built-in ways to actually built-in ensemble methods that actually say, okay, here's what's going into the model that's causing the model to predict this outcome. For a simple thing like a decision tree, we can look, okay, if the value is above this, then it's going to be this, and if not that, then that, and we can see what the model is actually doing. But for more complicated things like machine learning models or random forests that have incredibly complicated complicated ways of finding their solutions, then we need other tools. So primarily what we'll do is we'll either start with a few parameters and say, okay, how does the model do with this? How does the model perform with this? And what effect does taking out this input have on the output? And the other way we do it is by taking away parameters. So we'll start with all our parameters and take away some and see what effect it has. If it has no effect, then that input probably isn't having any effect in the output. It's the model doesn't really care about it at all. Or there's another input that's doing the same thing as that one. And so we can understand, okay, here are the inputs, the values, say temperature, pressure, and moisture, for example, that are the most important to the model, and other ones like say humidity is not important. And then it can also understand, well, what effect does it have on the output in terms of how well the model is performing, or if it's predicting a higher or lower value based on this. And that can allow us to infer indirectly, but still as well as we can in the modern era of very complex systems, what the model is doing inside. So again, there's a lot of great research working on that. I wish I had been able to time to read all the papers on that, and that's a very, very important field, especially as we're using it in safety critical applications. But that's something that we are really trying to do in meteorology and in other fields as well.
Great. I just want to let you know that the chat is just going nuts. They're loving you so much. You're going to have to read this stuff later.
Sure thing, yeah.
Everyone's coming in.
Absolutely.
Let's see. Alyssa Pipe asks, how far into the future can AI-driven weather forecasting reasonably predict?
So that's a really good question. So actually right now, at least I've actually done some work on this. This was actually, in broad terms at least, this was, I built a system to do this for a major weather company. Initially for a specific client, but it can actually be applied to other things as well, and it's very similar to so if you ever see forecasts from the Weather Service and from like AccuWeather and Weather Underground and weather.com, for example, well, why do those forecasts different? Do they use different models? Well, so there's really two things going on here. So we have, there's statistical models, there's the machine learning models basically that take some numbers and basically you train them on lots and lots of input data and you try to get an output that best matches the true output. So like, let's say you have, suppose you have a bunch of variables, right? Well, let's say it's cloudy, and we have rain forecast. Well, the temperature is probably going to be pretty low because the clouds block the sun, and it's going to be a little cooler during the day and warmer during the night because the clouds keep the warmth in, basically. And so a very simple model would do something like that, and more complex models get more complex. But those kind of break down over longer periods of time. As we get to larger spatial and temporal scales, as we go out to multiple days, those types of models, which include machine learning models, don't tend to do as great a job. Now, if you have a huge amount of data, huge computing resources, and you can run it, with a huge supercomputer, then potentially it could still do a good job at longer lead times. But because of chaos theory, things, the old butterfly analogy, things tend to break down over longer periods. But the other tool we have in our toolbox, these tools complement one another. It's called Dynamical Models. So these are models that are fed with basically sort of like what I was talking about with the thrust vectoring, the core equations that govern what happens in the atmosphere. It's about 10 or 11 equations that determine everything that happens, and they run them in each grid cell. They split the world up into grid cells of a few kilometers or miles across, or maybe many for a large scale model. And we do the equations here, and then we do the equations here, we do the equations here when we run it step by step by step by step. And that gets us basically just running the basic equations instead of actually trying to make the model figure out what those equations are. We know what they are. They're kind of hard to solve, and there's always errors in that too. But that can get us out to about 7 days, 5 to 7 days, sometimes 10 days if you're really lucky. And so those are actually dynamical models. Those are using the equations, not using machine learning. So those can, and anything beyond that, like AccuWeather, they have like a 30-day, 90-day forecast. Those, don't trust that. Like, really, I talked to the AccuWeather guys. I was like, you guys are, that's actually less accurate than just looking at what's the average temperature and humidity for a day. It's less accurate than just looking at the long-term average, what we call climatology. So currently those models can get us out to 5, 7, maybe even 10 days. But machine learning, well, where can that step in? Well, that's actually very important too. So in combination, so actually what we do is we take the output of those models, of those dynamical models that use the core equations. Well, sometimes those models can be off. Like if it might be a little too warm or too cold, and that might be consistent. So consistently in your area, if the weather forecast is they always forecast too high a temperature, or say too much snow, for example, and you know that your area gets less snow usually, or lower temperature, well, the model can actually take in the machine learning models can actually take in that data and all the other data points of what it takes the prediction for the dynamical model, and it says, okay, well, how can we take this data and how can we adjust, how can we fix the errors in the dynamical model? Machine learning models are really good at doing that. That's what's called post-processing, or called model output statistics. In the past, we used very simple methods for that, but now we're using more complex machine learning-based approaches that can get much better results, and that's why you see different results in different weather sites. They're using different techniques for that. So that can actually get us much better results. And that may not move it out too far, but it makes the results at shorter terms, especially, much more accurate. So so we can more accurately predict the temperature for a given day and take into account all those little variations that the big simplified equations don't always capture. So they actually work very well in tandem, and that's something I built something like that for the weather company that I worked for. And there's a lot of progress to go on that.
I have a question for you.
Fire away.
Okay, knowing what you know now at...
Not much, but...
May I ask your age?
Yes, I am... Wait, what am I again?
What are you?
26.
26, okay. Now that you're 26 years of life, you could give your maybe 13-year-old self, so half your age, any advice. What would
that is a good question.
What advice
One I'll have to think about for a moment.
13-year-old self. You can think about it, and I can.
Yeah.
I can
well, I probably would have invested more money in Apple and Google, and maybe Bitcoin too. And then I'd probably be Elon Musk over there with building the Starship. Maybe I'd be Jared Isaacman going on Inspiration 4 or something.
I mean, maybe you are the next Elon Musk.
I don't know about that, but I'm Cam Gerlach. That's a good question. I mean, that was kind of like I had a lot of lucky opportunities right around that period, and a lot of things really changed for me. I realized a lot of things about myself and about other people and how I was treating other people and kind of looking at the world in a different way that's a little bit more holistic and inclusive and not just self-centered. I still can be a little bit caught up in my own head sometimes when I get excited about something or just in general. But
you're human. Congratulations.
Yes. It's certain. To be human is to be imperfect, and that's what kind of drives me, is always pushing closer. And I know we can never be perfect, and nothing can ever be perfect. I can be a bit too much of a perfectionist, but it always gives me a target to strive for. I'm always pushing harder and getting better and helping others more, and building better systems. And that's what I love. A bit of a tangent, but that's what I really love about open source and about science, is that we're not just building things for a company, which is great, which is a really good and important thing, because we need profit to make money to be able to build these starships. But on the other hand, I really love building tools, especially open source tools, that anyone can use, that millions of people use around the world right now. And with Python and with Spider, people from all over the world are saying, oh, well, I'm using Spider for this, I'm using it for that, I've made it into this whole different thing that helps my community in this way or helps my research in that way. And we share and we build upon each other's work, and they build upon my work and I build upon their work, and we continue building the fundamental building blocks that help get things like Starship off the ground. And so that has its place, and so does this. And I think that's what's really what I really love to do. But in terms of giving myself advice, I'm kind of stalling on that question. That's because it's such a good question. It really makes you think.
That's no problem.
No.
You know what?
I mean,
I'm going to move on.
Yeah.
We could go to Mars. Would you? Sorry.
Oh, that's a tough question. Yeah. I mean, it would depend on the circumstances, depending on how much it would be. Yeah. But certainly, I think...
If you had a free ride to Mars, all expenses paid, they wanted you to, and they would pay you to go. I could see that.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Would you go and stay? Would you go and come back?
I guess I would see how it would be when I get there. I mean, it's going to be a tough place. Like, there's no illusions. It is not going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of challenges, and some of them will take years, and not generations, to start to get easier. I mean, it's not going to be as easy as settling the U.S. I mean, it's inhospitable planet, that soil that will kill you if it comes in contact with you too much, and it's you can't breathe the air. You got to be shielded from solar radiation. There's a lot of challenges. It's going to be tough. Maybe not as the first wave. I'm more of a software ideas guy, more of an architect, less of an engineer, but certainly potentially in future waves of colonization. I mean, once have experience, I mean, there's so much experience here on Earth, but certainly, I mean, being part of the future of humanity, it's too good to pass up. I mean, I always wanted to be an astronaut, always wanted to do something like that, and certainly that kind of opportunity. That's the advice. That's the advice I would give myself. I've had a lot of opportunities in my life. I've been very, very fortunate in so many ways, but I had a lot of opportunities, and I certainly took a lot of them early on. But after that, I think there were a lot more in hindsight that I could have taken, and not just in terms of things like going and being an internship for this, but also just taking opportunity to do, say, volunteer stuff, or taking the opportunity to get to know other people better and get from other countries and explore the world more, and really focus more on not just the things like the geeky brain stuff that I've always been kind of into, but also being more in touch with other people, more empathetic empathetic and focusing on the kind of the core skills that have always been the critical path, the limiting factor, which is time management, communication skills, and interpersonal relations. Because I mean, you can be great at doing lots of great science, writing lots of great code and software. But as I've learned doing my documentation work, I mean, all that doesn't really matter much if you can't communicate it. You can't share in a scientific research. If you can't share it with your colleagues, you can't convince others. You can't work with others and collaborate to make something better than you could yourself. And most importantly, you couldn't allow others to use it and build upon it and make something even cooler. So that's been a real big thing that I've learned, and I continue to learn every day, because there's so much that I can do better every day, and so much that I find out like, oh man, I finally figured it all out. But it's like next morning you wake up and man, I could have done this better, but can't get too caught up in that. But it's always something to keep in mind, is there's always things we can do better, but there always is, so don't get too down on that, but keep moving forward.
We have a lot of people requesting that you have a YouTube channel or a podcast or something, that they just want to hear you speak all day long.
Well, that's all I do anyway. I speak all day long anyway,
Everybody's talking.
I listen to myself speak all day long, so.
Okay, so we have multiple people asking, I'm going to ask again. I know that you said you don't have personal social media channels. Do you have a Twitter?
Well, we have the Starfleet Twitter. I do technically have a Twitter, Cam-Gerlach or something. I don't really use it much. I'm not super. I don't use a lot of social media myself. Ain't nobody got time for that.
How to follow you?
Yeah.
Where can I find him?
Well, we got the Starfleet. We got our SpaceX Twitter. We got. I have no weather ones, but. Yeah, I mean, really, I
just want more of you.
Wow. Oh, here's more Cam. Here we go. But, yeah, okay. All right, Jessica, you're fired.
There we go. We need a Cam live feed is what they're asking. A Cam.
It's the Cam right here.
Awesome.
Cam. All right, that's enough. I can't sing. That's one thing I can not do.
Oh, gosh, left and right.
Yeah.
So good. Wow. Everybody has really enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
I've really enjoyed it too.
Coming on camera.
On camera. I see what you did there.
Oh my gosh, it just keeps coming.
It keeps Cam.
Everybody, let's give some snaps to Cam in the chat. Everybody.
They keep camming and they won't stop camming.
Hey-oh. How long are you in town for?
I'm here all week. But yeah, I'm till Friday.
Friday morning, Friday evening.
Probably Friday midday.
We might have to do another interview.
Absolutely.
We'll get some questions.
Yeah, I want to be here tomorrow for the cleanup, so I'll probably be here around, and hope to catch more of you guys then. So thanks. I love the questions. Love the opportunity to be here. Thanks, of course, to Jessica and all you guys for putting it on. And hope to see you guys soon.
Awesome.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, chat.
Yep.
All right.
Awesome.
Snap.